The courtroom was heavy with silence, the kind that pressed against your chest. Only the echo of polished shoes on marble broke through as the guards led Ruth Brooks to the stand, wrists bound in cold steel. In the corner, her 8-year-old daughter, Aaliyah, gripped a small, worn sketchbook against her chest. Her eyes followed her mother, not with fear, but with something deeper, something fierce. "Order in the court," the judge muttered, tapping the gavel once, already tired of the noise. A muffled laugh rose from the audience, sharp, cruel. Someone whispered, "What's that little girl gonna do?" Aaliyah took a slow step forward. The chains around her mother's wrists rattled softly. She looked up at the bailiff, voice calm and clear. "Let go of my mom," she said, "and I'll make you stand." The room froze. For a second, no one moved. And then laughter erupted again. Even the prosecutor smirked, but Aaliyah didn't blink. Her tiny fingers rested on her sketchbook like it held something powerful, and within moments, that laughter would turn into stunned, breathless silence. But the next minute, that laughter would stop, replaced by something no courtroom had ever seen before. Before the courtroom, before the handcuffs, there was just Ruth Brooks, a nurse who never raised her voice, even when the world was unkind. She moved through the hospital halls like light through glass, gentle, steady, always where she was needed. Her patients loved her. Her co-workers depended on her. But one man, wealthy, powerful, and angry, didn't survive his surgery. And when his family demanded someone to blame, Ruth's name was the easiest one to say. She wasn't even on duty that night. Still, the whispers began. "She must have made a mistake before. She's quiet. Maybe she's hiding something." Now, that same quiet woman sat in court, accused, humiliated and handcuffed. From the front row, Aaliyah clutched her sketchbook. She had spent weeks drawing her mother's smile while waiting outside the courtroom, tracing every detail as if to keep her close. The defense lawyer sneered. "No words, Mrs. Brooks?" "You're silent as always." Ruth said nothing. She just turned her eyes toward her daughter, calm, patient, unbroken. Aaliyah remembered her mother's voice that morning, soft and tired. "Kindness is louder than anger, baby. Always remember that." Back in the courtroom, Ruth's handcuffs tightened as the guards pulled her away. Aaliyah stood up, her voice trembling but strong. "Let her go," she said again. The judge looked up, startled. The little girl's tone wasn't loud, but it filled every corner of the room. Gasps rippled through the benches. Even the stenographer stopped typing, and for the first time that day, the judge looked unsure, because the child wasn't done speaking. And for the first time, even the judge looked unsure, because the child wasn't done speaking. Aaliyah's small voice broke the silence. "Your Honor, I need to show you something." Her hands trembled as she opened the sketchbook. Page after page filled the air with color. There were faces on smiling, healed, alive. Doctors shaking hands with patients, children holding flowers, and in every drawing, a single woman stood in the background, her eyes soft, her hands steady. "Ruth Brooks. These," Aaliyah said, her voice clear but fragile, "are the people my mom fixed." She looked around the courtroom. She didn't fix machines. She fixed hearts. The prosecutor rose sharply. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant." But the judge lifted a hand. "Let her continue." Aaliyah turned toward the witness stand. There sat an elderly man in a wheelchair, quiet since the trial began. His head was bowed, his hands folded tight. Aaliyah stepped closer. "You remember her, don't you?" she asked softly. "You were her patient." The man didn't move. "You told me once," Aaliyah continued, "that she helped you walk again after your accident." Her words trembled like candlelight, small, but impossible to ignore. The entire courtroom leaned in. Ruth sat frozen, her lips parted but no sound coming. Then, a faint scrape echoed across the floor. The man's hand gripped the arm of his chair. His fingers flexed. His face tightened with effort. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as he pushed the wheelchair back, inch by inch, until it rolled away behind him. And then he stood, wobbly at first, then straight. A tear slipped down his cheek as he whispered, She told me I'd stand again. I just never thought it would be today, the audience murmured. Some crossed themselves, others simply stared. The judge sat back, pale, unable to speak. Even the bailiff looked stunned. Aaliyah turned toward the prosecutor, voice gentle but firm. So, was she really careless? Or just too kind for you to understand? Her words hung in the air like a verdict no one could challenge. Ruth buried her face in her hands, trembling. But not from fear this time. What would you do if you were there? Believe in a miracle, or call it coincidence? And then the room fell utterly silent because the impossible had just happened. The courtroom gasped. Even Ruth froze as the man took his first full step. The courtroom was chaos wrapped in silence. The judge's gavel struck the desk once, twice, bang, bang! But no one looked her way. All eyes were on the old man. He stood tall now, one trembling hand gripping the rail beside him. His voice broke as he pointed toward Ruth. "This woman," he said, his throat tight with emotion, "saved my life when others gave up." A hush swept through the benches. Reporters stopped typing mid-word. The prosecutor took an uneasy step back, his confidence gone. The man continued, stronger now. "If she hadn't believed in me, I'd still be in that chair, or in the ground." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. Her knees gave out and she sank to the floor, hands over her face. Aaliyah ran to her, wrapping tiny arms around her mother's shoulders. "It's okay, Mama," she whispered. "See? You fix hearts, even in court." The judge's eyes glistened as she cleared her throat. Her voice shook slightly, betraying the weight of the moment. "This case is over," she said. "All charges dismissed." Gasps filled the room. People began to clap, some standing in awe. The prosecutor closed his briefcase quietly. No protest, no appeal. And in that instant, justice didn't come from law books. It came from love. The judge leaned forward, softer now. "Little girl," she said, "I think your mother just raised a miracle worker." Aaliyah smiled faintly, not proud, just peaceful. "She raised me," she said simply. "Share this if you still believe love and faith can move what the world calls impossible." But what the judge said next made even the cameras stop rolling. The courtroom had emptied, but the echoes of what happened still hung in the air. The judge stepped down from the bench, her robe brushing softly against the marble floor. She stopped before Aaliyah, who stood clutching her sketchbook like a shield. The judge knelt to meet her eyes. "Young lady," she said gently, "you reminded us all what justice truly means." Aaliyah blinked, unsure how to respond. The judge smiled faintly. "Don't ever stop believing that truth can speak, even when it's small." Moments later, Ruth was freed. The guards unlatched the cuffs, and the sound of metal falling to the floor echoed louder than the gavel had. Aaliyah ran forward, nearly tripping as she threw her arms around her mother. The sketchbook was pressed tightly between them, smudged with tears, fingerprints, and courage. Weeks passed. The news called it the miracle in court. But to Ruth and Aaliyah, it was just a new beginning. Ruth returned to her hospital, not as a defendant, but as a hero. The same man who had stood from his wheelchair visited her, smiling proudly. "I'm sponsoring a new clinic," he said, "in your name, for healers like you." On the clinic's wall, framed under glass, hung one of Aaliyah's drawings. The moment the man stood, sunlight breaking through the courtroom windows. At the bottom, written in Aaliyah's uneven handwriting, were the words, "The day the world stood up." One quiet morning, as they locked up the clinic after their first week, Ruth looked down at her daughter. "You made them see the truth, baby," she said softly. Aaliyah shook her head, her small smile wiser than her years. "No, Mama," she whispered, holding her sketchbook close. "You already did." They walked away together, mother and daughter, hand in hand, as the morning light spilled across the sidewalk like a promise renewed. Subscribe for more stories where courage speaks louder than power. What if innocence isn't weakness, but the only strength the world still understands?